Hey everyone, Cary here with Ask Kolat, presented by RUDIS. Hey, if you got any questions, leave them at the bottom of the video, and RUDIS will get them to me. Didn't really want to answer a question this week because I've been working on something with Matt, and if you follow along in our podcast, we're reading a different book, and I don't want to give it away just right now. But I read this, and it brought me back to discussions I've had before, just in general through wrestling, and it may sound redundant if you follow along, but sometimes people put things in a different context, and it may make sense. And I assume it's coaches and parents who listen to some of these talks. The book I'm reading talks about a guy. He finds companies that are down. Maybe they're on the verge of bankruptcy, or they're just in a slump, and obviously he's got the cash to come in, and he buys them and he turns them around and he makes them profitable again. And so he bought this one particular company, and in the process, he went to the cafeteria and he watched his workers, his employees, and he watched them laugh and joke and drink coffee in the morning before work started, and then it was time to go to work. Either the bell went off or whatever it may be. And he said he noticed as soon as it was time, everybody's expression changed. He saw a group of unhappy employees about to go and do what they're going to do. Now, look, I know a lot of us aren't happy with our jobs out there. If you're watching this, you may not be happy. You may be in the wrong profession, and so that happens as well. But when you got a whole group, or you say you have more negatives than you have positives, right? It's going to hurt the performance. And so that was probably one of the first things that probably put that company in a slump. And he goes and he talks a little bit later about how he went to a wedding and he watched the father, walk down the aisle with his daughter and give her hand to her future husband, and basically he said he looked at that and said, well, now it's that guy's job to take care of her, that guy's job to protect her, that guy's job to make her happy, right? That's what it is when you give your daughter away. And he related that to his company, and he said he brainstormed after going to that wedding. He realized what he needed to do. He needed to give his employees ownership, motivation, all these things in the company to make it profitable once again. And he said what he realized the problem is the CEO who was in control, it was, and probably the VPs and everybody, is where's the stock out in this quarter? Where's the stock in the next quarter? So you have this very small window of time, and what happens is you start putting pressure on your employees and your VPs and your management and all that. And when you're trying to, in these short windows, trying to get from point A to point B and make sure everything's running and the stock is up, you start to lose sight of developing an employee, and you take the fun out of it, and you take the enjoyment out of being there. And what he does is he looks at the company and says, okay, maybe it's down on its luck right now, but he looks at it in 20 and 15 and 10-year snapshots and says, how did this thing start? How did it grow? How did it progress? And when you look at something like that and you expand it, you can see, hey, this is a really good company. This thing has gotten to a point where maybe he got a few million off on it, out of it because it was hurting at the time. But when you look at it as a whole, from where something starts, like McDonald's, it starts with one store, and then you look at it progress, and maybe the stock goes down some point. It's still a very strong company, and that's how he viewed it. But when you put people in quarters, and you got to hit the number, they stop being employees, happy employees, and they start getting crunched. My relation to this with wrestling is that that's the problem with coaches who watch preseason starts and you're already fixated on March. And so you're trying to compress people, right? And we say the same thing about athletes. When I get guys, when they come into the freshman year, I'm telling them, where are you going to be in 5 years? Now, that doesn't mean they can't win out of the gate. But you have to have that approach of how am I going to progress and how am I going to move. When you put somebody in a box and say, doesn't matter till March, which this is a redundant speech, which you've heard before, I just thought, reading this and seeing how he viewed a company, and when you break it in quarters, you realize the crunch that people get under and the self-inflicted stress and pressure of being in the job. And that's the same thing with the career. Everybody wants to hurry up and be ready for March, but we all want to be ready for March, but the focus has to be maintained on where is my career going to be, and if you're in college and at the end of this 5-year period, or where is it going to be, from a freshman in high school by my senior year, how much am I going to progress by that time frame? And when you, as the coach, squeeze somebody, and you squeeze them, and maybe they have a bad duel, and now you're going to go run them up a mountain, and you're going to penalize them, and you're going to beat them up. mentally and physically, you're not going to get that athlete that's happy and wanting to get in the room and wrestle. And if you're a business owner, you're not going to get that employee that's happy and wants to get in there and be motivated and feel like he's part of the company and watch it grow. And in the end, sometimes you got to step back, and sometimes you got to go back and revisit, in the sport of wrestling, revisit the fundamentals and the foundation. Whether it's basic shots or basic bottom movements or riding. Sometimes you got to step back no matter where you're at. You just got to slow down and start that progression all over, or reset your mind a little bit and reset your wrestling a little bit. And I think that's what this guy does. He goes in and he finds this company that had this great, history, and then it drops a little bit. And by taking that approach, you're resetting the employees, and you're allowing them to learn and learn from each other and learn from upper management. And when people are happy, it's a fact. You're going to perform better on the mat. You're going to perform better at your job. I don't think anybody wants to go to their job and be miserable all the time. And also, in the end, sometimes you gotta make yourself happy. Sometimes people look at things and they stress themselves out, or they complain too much. And so if you got a mind full of negative thoughts, where nobody's going to be happy with what they're doing. But anyway, that was just a thought. Matt and I will be covering the book later this week and start to get into it, and follow the podcast if you want. But again, it's a long race. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. In your career, and that's the approach you need to have. All right, take care. I'll talk to you all next week.